Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this. I hope you're all having a good day. I want to take a second bite of the apple and talking about the thesis. Some of this comes from another source or other sources than the previous one, and I think it's important to try to emphasize that the thesis is the key to the paper. It is the key to writing, it's the key to solving any problems, the idea of what's the point I'm trying to get across. So we're going to talk about writing the thesis. I'm going to have a few tips. I'll give my sources at the end, and we'll kind of hopefully, I hope this helps. First of all, I'm going to repeat what I have said a lot of times and will continue to say. Everything's an argument. It was a title of a textbook I used a couple of years back, and it's also from the source that I'm using, how to write like a writer. Every essay is an argument, even if its only point is, I'm worth reading. And remember, an argument is not just saying, yes, it is, no, it isn't. An argument is a proposition that is supported by data and has warrants to link the data to that proposition. This thesis sets up an argument, even if the only argument is, please read me. And since I just used the phrase, please read me, I think it's important to remember that don't make this essay a 6-year-old begging for candy. The thesis has to sound confident. And yes, perhaps you're doing something totally ridiculous, but it still has to sound confident. Perhaps you're taking a position that even you don't believe, but you just want to experiment with, can I pull this off? Don't sound like a 6-year-old begging. Be confident. Single minded. Thesis has one job. One simple job. Show me that the essay is worth reading. Not just me, anyone. Show that the essay is worth reading. You're not begging for a reader. You are using the thesis to prove to your reader it's worth reading. You're making the argument. This essay is worth your time. And again, in the year of our Lord 2023, all of us are much more cognizant of the time we have. And all of us, if we've got a spare second, would probably rather run to our phone and read a book, play a game, text somebody, rather than read an essay. You have to use that thesis to get your reader to say, stick with me. Dynamic. I don't recall who said it, but the person was talking about fiction, and he said, the purpose of writing is to get the reader to be surprised. And that surprise is built in fiction by suspense, by rising action, but it's all about getting the reader to turn the page with the suspense. Your thesis needs to be dynamic enough to push the reader to the next paragraph, and then once you get to the bottom of the page, the next page, and all subsequent pages. It must be dynamic. The writing that you do must be dynamic, and the thesis must be your most dynamic piece of writing to get people to the next paragraph and then subsequent pages. Flawless. There are dozens of little errors that say, I'm done. They can happen throughout the paper. But certainly, if your thesis has the error, it can't work. People will not want to keep reading. To go back to things I hope you're learning in speech class, your ethos has been shattered. The thing that says this person is worth sticking with has been shattered. Whether it's a grammatical mistake, whether it's just being too wordy, whatever it is, errors in the thesis prevent people from wanting to read. I mentioned earlier, it has to be economical. No extra words, no extra phrases, no extra details, no elaboration. All of this elaboration that's in the little cartoon word bubble that you see here might be something you want to put in subsequent paragraphs. The thesis is we saw an eagle. That's it. The idea that it's a beautiful, majestic bird, that might come in subsequent paragraphs. The idea that outside with two boys doesn't matter. The idea that Deborah is a talker doesn't matter. What matters is we saw an eagle. No extra words. Be economical in your word usage. I hope, now that I've listed a whole bunch of rules, that these next few slides have hints that are helpful. Avoid the "in this paper I will discuss." It isn't about you. It's about the topic. It's about the subject. Focus on the ideas. Focus on the topic, not on the writer. Keep the reader focused on the writer. If you do this as part of the planning, you have a little note card saying, in this paper I will discuss A, B, C. And that little note card helps you stay focused. Awesome. Otherwise, just don't even do it. Remember, thesis has one job: to focus on the topic, to get the reader to keep reading. Any distraction, including making the reader think about you as a writer, probably means the thesis isn't working. Ask yourself, what's in it for the reader? And answer the question with an action verb. Think clearly about what's there, and think clearly about, I am making a promise to the reader that this is going to pay off. The thesis is that promissory note. The thesis is that action. Also, think about it like a roadmap. For you as a writer, this is how I'm getting from point A to point B. I hope that as you're writing this summary response, the summary is, I need to show that green made these 3 points. The response is, green is messed up. How do I get my reader to see these 3 points? And how do I get my reader to understand that green is messed up? It's a roadmap. How do I get from point A to point B with as few detours as possible, with as few side adventures as possible? This is not a 6 weeks family vacation. This is a commute, trying to get to work on time, dodging plugged streets, dodging road construction, getting to work on time. This is the roadmap getting me there. At times, you should just be conventional. Meet the reader's expectations. If you're writing an essay exam, I think the thesis is the first thing you write down. However, if you're writing an essay, most people expect it at the end of the first paragraph. You have heard me preach ad nauseum about the funnel idea, funneling everything to the bottom, and being the most specific thing at the bottom. That's your thesis. Most readers expect it at the end of the first paragraph. Sometimes it's okay to be conventional and put it there. Narrow your target audience. Who is your one ideal reader? And write for that ideal reader. If I'm writing about one of Green's essays, like, for example, the Wintry Mix one, and I am writing for people in South Dakota who deal with wintry mix. If I am writing for people in Florida, I have to spend a whole bunch of time describing it and explaining it. If I'm writing for people in Yankton, South Dakota, I'm going to do a different thing. Who's my ideal reader, and what do I have to do for that ideal reader? Again, if the target audience knows what something is, you don't have to define it. If they don't know what something is, you do have to define it. Think about who's your ideal reader. What do you want to accomplish for that ideal reader? Talk about the main point. Talk about it to yourself. Talk about it to someone else. If you're talking to yourself, at least hopefully you're listening. Talk about it. And then write it down. Get it on paper, get it on screen, get it in a document and save it. Use Google Keep, use whatever Apple Notes app is there, use pen and paper. Write it down so that you don't forget. All of these images were stolen from the web for educational purposes. As I said earlier, this was adapted from How to Write Like a Writer. And I also adapted a few things about from Smart Brevity, the power of saying more with less. I hope this has been helpful to get you thinking about the thesis for the summary response. Remember, with the summary response, you have to tell me what John Green's thesis is in one of his essays that was on the assignment. And for the response, you have to have a thesis that gets the reader to want to keep reading to the end to see that your response, that your argument with or agreement with, and by agreeing with him, you are arguing he's worth reading, your agreement with Green is worthwhile. Hope everyone has a good day, and I hope to see all of you in the next class period.